Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Tuesday, July the 22nd, 2025. Today, the Sun moves into Leo, and this is an important event. The Sun works extremely well in this sign. After all, the Sun is the ruler of Leo, and I thought this would be a great opportunity to have another look at what the sign Leo means, particularly if someone has their Sun in Leo. So I thought, to celebrate the Sun's entry into Leo, I would look at a few famous or infamous Leos. Hence my description of this video on the thumbnail: the good, the bad, and the ugly. But before I look at the good, the bad, and the ugly, I want to look at the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Tuesday, July the 22nd, 2025. So here is the chart for today, set for noon, New York time, July the 22nd. And by the way, if you happen to like this video, I'd be very grateful if you indeed were to like it. If you're not subscribed, feel free to subscribe. So here is the chart for today, and so you can see that the Sun is in Leo, sort of New York time, 0 degrees 6 minutes Leo. So to be precise, the Sun moves into Leo London time at 2:29 p.m. sort of early afternoon, sort of an hour later if you're in continental Europe, sort of 3:29. Is that right? Yeah, 3:29. So this afternoon, if you're in Europe or Africa, the sun moves into Leo. Now, if you're in the Americas, then that takes place this morning. Now, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, well, that might not take place until very late tonight or into tomorrow. So that's one thing going on. So we've got the Sun changing sign. We've also got the Moon changing sign. We've got the Moon moving out of Gemini into Cancer. So that is another sign change where a planet is moving into its own sign. So the Sun is moving into Leo. Sun rules Leo, and the Moon is moving into Cancer, and the Moon rules Cancer. So both the Sun and the Moon are in their own signs. So that gives today a fundamental strength, which regardless of any aspects we have, some of the aspects today are not especially fortunate, but this positional strength of the Sun and the Moon may give us positional strength. We might feel that there are challenges, things might be annoying us, but fundamentally we're okay. And so maybe that's what you should think about today. Regardless of what your sign is. Now, Moon moving into Cancer is, for most of us, should be fairly good news. The Moon rules Cancer, and when the Moon moves into Cancer, it does start making a conjunction to Jupiter. Now, the exact conjunction between the Moon and Jupiter is not exact until tomorrow, but we will still be feeling it. And so the Moon moves into Cancer this morning if you're in the Americas, sort of early afternoon if you're in Europe or sort of Africa. So Moon moving into Cancer is something which might give us some stability, a feeling that things are stable and calm, and we have a chance to relax and to tune into our feelings and maybe sort of calm down. But the Moon conjunct Jupiter, that is a fortunate conjunction. It sort of overrides some of the less fortunate aspects the Moon is making. So what happens is the moon moves into Cancer, then it makes a square to Saturn and a square to Neptune. So, moon square Neptune is not really a bundle of laughs. Certainly moon square Saturn, moon square Neptune, it's worried. I mean, it's that Saturnine feel, which possibly overrides for Neptune. And so moon square Saturn, we may feel that something is blocked, and perhaps it's our own feelings, our own reservations, with the moon, squaring Saturn and Neptune. There is also a decile between Mercury and Mars. So Mercury and Mars are 36 degrees apart, and so that's the kind of thing that we're struggling to create. Mercury Mars, we're struggling to be able to say something, and we feel nervous, and we feel we would like to say something, but can we do it? And I think that if we can use our willpower, we'll find the opportunity to tell the world what we think. And talking about Mars, there is a square between Venus and Mars. Now, that Venus and Mars is not exact today, I don't think, but it's pretty close, and it's kind of tied up with the North Node or the South Node, because you've got Mars conjunct the South Node, you've got Venus square the South Node. And I talked about Venus and Mars sort of yesterday, so it's kind of more of the same. I mean, Venus and Mars is a pairing that is about attraction and lack of attraction. It tries very hard to be attractive, but it doesn't always succeed. And some things we do can get us attention, but is it always going to be favourable attention? But we're going to want attention. And how we express ourselves, how we try to be charismatic with Venus square Mars, does matter. And so perhaps think about attractiveness and what is going to support attractiveness and what might go against it. And Venus and Mars, both planets connected, with sexuality, and so when they are in square with each other, there can be some friction. I mean, friction can be exciting, but friction can also get worse, and things may become problematic. So, just because you might be suddenly attracted to someone, doesn't mean to say that attraction will go on forever. It's always possible with Venus square Mars that one party will get bored, or indeed might experience the opposite of attraction. Attraction can so easily turn to repulsion with Venus square Mars. And so that is the viewpoint from the perspective of New York. So if we set the chart for Sydney, Australia, as Australasia in general, Sydney being a representative of Australasia, then at noon, the moon is in Gemini, very much in Gemini, 23 Gemini. So if you are in Australasia, and I've talked a lot about, or have made some mention at least, of the moon being in Cancer, moon doesn't really go into Cancer today. That's more about tomorrow. And so today is about the moon moving through the last degrees of Gemini, and even the sun is moving through the last degree of Cancer. So, sorry, the last degree of Cancer. So, Sun in Leo, Moon in Cancer may be more about tomorrow. And so, compared to the Americas, if you are in Australasia, there may be not quite so much going on, and it may be sort of more about preparation or finishing things up rather than sort of addressing anything new and exciting. Turning to the heliocentric view, putting the Earth at the center of the solar system, and we still have this T-square. Jupiter is still opposition Mercury, and then we've got sort of Jupiter relatively close to the square of Neptune. So, I mean, I know that Mercury is, a long way from the square of Neptune, but you could say that Jupiter is on the Mercury-Neptune midpoint, or at least is making a sesquiquadrate to the Mercury-Neptune midpoint. And so Jupiter sesquiquadrate Mercury-Neptune could be strange thoughts, interesting thoughts, thoughts that may have a supernatural nature. It's possible that the universe, or at least the solar system, is trying to talk to us, and we're getting a feeling that things are starting to change, and change takes place first of all at an intangible level. There are changes at a very high level, which, at first we don't understand, but we just know that something is going on. Of course, we need to have the sensitivity to realize what's happening, or at least to get an inkling. And so maybe we should try to tune into the solar system and, whatever it might be telling us. And, while all this is going on, Venus is starting to make an opposition to Mars. So we've got Venus opposition Mars heliocentric, Venus square Mars geocentric. So it's all the same message. Venus and Mars, whether it's in opposition or a square, they are, to an extent, at war with one another. It's therefore the case that the closer you get to someone, and the more a relationship moves to the emotional and perhaps the sexual, the more problems might occur. Closeness is a risk, and I think that these difficult aspects between Venus and Mars are suggesting that there's a risk. And the closer you get to someone, the more likely it is that something goes wrong, or one party just has a change of mind, or realizes this is not for them. So relationships, especially close relationships at the moment, do have to be treated with a degree of caution. And note that the Earth is now in Aquarius. So when the Sun is in Leo, geocentrically, that means that the Earth is in Aquarius, heliocentrically, by definition. And we know that the Sun is starting to make an opposition to Pluto. And that means that heliocentrically, the Earth is starting to make a conjunction to Pluto. And there it is. And I kind of find the heliocentric conjunction sort of more descriptive than the opposition. It's kind of nice to think of the Earth moving towards that conjunction of Pluto, about to be influenced by Pluto, maybe even put under the shadow of Pluto. And so with Earth conjunct Pluto, we can think that things are becoming more intense, and we can perhaps see the shadows lengthening. And we're also just aware that things really are complicated. So those are a few thoughts about the heliocentric picture, and now it's time to look at things from the viewpoint of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Tuesday, July the 22nd, 2025. Aries. Change is in the air. The sun and the moon, the two most important bodies in astrology, are changing sign today. The moon is going into Cancer, and the sun is moving into Leo. And on the surface, that gives a rather confusing message. So, you think with the moon moving into Cancer, this is a time to be more cautious, to look after yourself. It's not a time for seeking the bright lights, being desperate for attention. And then you got the sun moving into Leo, sun moving into a fire sign. So if you're an Aries, sun moving into a fire sign, that's that sign being in Leo, that really picks you up. And, the sun does have a special relationship with Aries because the sun is exalted in this sign. So you could say that the sun is almost a co-ruler of Aries because of this exaltation link. And so, sun moving into Leo, into its own sign, really, it does give you a boost. Doesn't matter whether you're sort of living north or south of the equator. It's still about you having a chance to really express yourself and to feel your own power. Yet, how do we square that with the moon moving into Cancer? Now, the sun does stay in Leo for a month. The moon stays in Cancer for a few days, so it just might be a passing contradiction there. Although what you could say is that, the moon moving into Cancer is a very personal sign, especially if you're an Aries. It is at the bottom of your chart. It's all about you. It's not about you trying to be someone else, desperate to please other people, desperate to get noticed. No, it's about you just wanting your own space. And with the sun moving into Leo, likewise, it's not about compromising your individuality. And so you could say, Aries, with the sun and the moon making these two changes, that it really does emphasize you and what really is important to you. And I don't think you're going to feel, any great need to, do things other people's way. You have your own ideas, and that's probably how it should be. And we shouldn't forget that Venus is making a square to Mars, and Venus square Mars, it has an exciting reputation in some quarters. It can be about romance, passion, attraction, but it's a square. And in the right places you can be attractive and you can be charismatic. That's true. But on the other hand, in the wrong places, people might not be able to handle you. And if you look at if you do a risk-reward analysis, you might actually come to the conclusion that today other people aren't really worth bothering with. It's just too much effort. And the last thing you want to do, Aries, is to have to force yourself to be on best behavior. You're trying very hard not to upset anyone. I mean, even if you do try hard, you might still fail. And so it's probably better that you concentrate on yourself and what you're good at, and making yourself feel comfortable in your own creativity. And that is really what you should be concentrating on. And like yesterday, your own freedom cannot be compromised. You always value your freedom. I mean, that is almost an Aries trait, but it's a particularly strong thing at the moment. You need to be free. You need to be in a situation where you can largely do what you want, provided it's legal and ethical. And the less people around you, you could argue, well, the more freedom that you have. Taurus, the moon is changing sign, and this sign change, I think, is going to work quite well for you. So, with the moon moving into moon moving into Cancer, you are perhaps, less bothered about sort of annoying little things that might be about money or some other sort of material triviality, and you don't really want to have to worry too much about that. And with the moon moving into Cancer, I think that you can be sort of more genuine and more authentic, and you don't have to say anything. There's no pressure to say anything. Sometimes you want to just say nothing, and that might be best. And with moon in Cancer, though, if you want to communicate, you can. You can be very effective. But it's not the words that matter. It's just the fact that you are just there, and you can listen as well as speak, and you'll find yourself, by and large, being in the right places. So, if there's a lot of moving around, you can move from one place to another, and there'll be something guiding you, and it will be just telling you, well, you go here, it'll be fine. Things will work out here, there, and you just go with the flow. And so that perhaps is how it should work. Now, there may be moments today, Taurus, where something is trying to hold you back. It could be your own fears, something bothering you, something maybe of a psychological nature. You feel you don't want to do it. Perhaps you're reminded of the past, or just the past is trying to sort of rear its ugly head and tell you, no, you can't. And it's always good to be aware of the past and to think about what is holding you back. But just because you're aware doesn't mean that you have to be controlled, and you absolutely don't want to be controlled by the past, and you needn't be controlled by the past. And so over the course of a day, there just might be a temporary hiccup, something holding you back, some fear, some worry. But if you can just sort of get round the problem and not obsess about it, then you'll find the freedom that you've really been looking for. And the moon, having made the square to Jupiter and to Saturn and Neptune, it starts making a conjunction to Jupiter. As the day unfolds, that conjunction between the moon and Jupiter, gets stronger, and so this makes you more lucky and also more effective. And when dealing with other people, you just know what to say. You know what not to say, and it's quite possibly a good time for you to sort of introduce yourself to new people. People you've seen them around, but you never quite talked to them. But you talk to them for the first time, and straight away something really does start to happen. So it's a day when you shouldn't allow first impressions to hold you back. Just because something seems difficult, or you come up with some reason why you can't do something, doesn't mean you should be in a position where you are stuck. Just keep trying, keep moving, and things will start working. And as far as relationships are concerned, Venus is making a square to Mars. Of course, Venus is your ruler, and with this square to Mars, that might indicate that you can't necessarily get on with everyone, and it may represent a person who is holding you up, a person who maybe well, maybe you spend time with them, they're almost part of the scenery, and normally they aren't a problem. But today, any single person can be a problem. So I think, broadly speaking, as in terms of your social life and getting on with different people, it's looking great. But amongst all of that, any one of those people could be the one who does create a problem, and so you perhaps have to use your sensitivity, work out who the problem people might be, who are the people that might bring you to a standstill, and you just need to avoid those people and just concentrate on the people who can help move you along. So there are a few social decisions to make, but I don't want to make too much of this Venus square Mars. It's been around for a few days. I think it's not really exact until tomorrow, but it's still starting to make its influence felt, and it could just be that one-to-one relationships, you and someone else, and no one else is around, and it's just you and the other person. In that kind of situation, with this Venus square Mars, it might not always be easy. So maybe you shouldn't spend too much time with any one person. Gemini. We have the moon moving into Cancer, and we have the sun moving into Leo. So we did have a time when there were quite a few planets in Gemini, when we had 3 planets in Gemini. But when the moon moves out of Gemini into Cancer, well, that's one fewer planet in your sign. And so with the moon moving into Cancer, there may be other things that you need to start thinking about. And you can only talk about something for so long. You do at a certain stage have to ask yourself whether it's actually realistic, and it's possible that someone's kidding someone else, or you could be kidding yourself, because you haven't thought through the implications. And with moon moving into Cancer, you do have a chance to think about the implications of what you're thinking about, what you're planning. And implications can take many forms. And of course, one implication might be the financial implication, that everything does have this kind of implication, and perhaps something you were thinking about, excited about, may end up costing you money. It might not be money you feel you can afford. Yet, if there is something that you should be doing and money is a block, maybe the financial aspects of things will sort themselves out. It could be that something you thought was going to be expensive isn't actually going to be quite so expensive. Something you thought was going to cost actually can be obtained for free. Perhaps you don't have to buy it, you can borrow it. Maybe you can borrow it for nothing. I mean, that is a possibility. And also, the moon, when it moves into Cancer, is starting to make a conjunction to Jupiter. Now, on the way, the moon makes a square to Saturn and a square to Neptune. So there may be moments today when something connected with money does bother you. You're thinking, this isn't good. And that you could try almost convince yourself that because the financial aspect of something isn't dealt with, then there is no chance, that you have to kind of drop it. And it was a nice idea, but you can't afford it. But that would be a rather one-dimensional way of looking at things. And where there's a will, there's a way, and you don't have to bankrupt yourself to do something that is important to you. If something is really important to you, then you'll be able to find a way of doing it. And additionally, we have the sun moving into Leo. I mean, that is the headline event today. And so with the sun moving into Leo, this may say something about the way you present yourself. And many Geminis can come over as being quite warm. They can maybe not warm in an emotional way, but warm in a sort of a glowing way. That there's something glowing about you, and it's not it is wholesome. It's nothing to worry about, and it's just the energy is there, and once you start unloading what's on your mind, then that action, of course, creates energy. It's like I was reading that the brain takes up more calories than uses up more calories than pretty much every other organ of the body. I mean, it kind of makes sense if you do use a computing metaphor when you think about all these huge amounts of power used to fuel these sort of AI centers, and every time you ask a question on ChatGPT, it's costing a lot of resources. And is it eco to use ChatGPT? There are those kind of questions. I mean, are we ChatGPT? I'm not sure about that, but still, as your mind works, you create energy, and because you're creating energy, people are attracted to you, and it's because you've got something to say, you've got something important to say, and something which is at the same time interesting. And Gemini, you can be quite negative. Geminis are capable of being negative. If you've been watching my videos for long enough, me having my sun in Gemini, you'll know that I'm capable of just being incredibly negative. Not everyone appreciates my passing negativity. I mean, I'm just trying to be realistic. But is now a time for Geminis to be negative? I don't think so. I think it is a time for Geminis really to try to be as positive as possible. To really sort of encourage everyone around them. Be encouraging. Don't ask difficult questions unless you've got a good reason. People need to be given hope, not blind hope, but just they need to think that things are possible, and you can actually encourage people to really make the most of who they are and to avail themselves of various possibilities, and also think about yourself and what might be possible for you. And if you can think about a way of doing something, a way of making something successful, then you just have to put it into action and give it the energy it deserves. And it may all be about saying the right thing. And so if you feel you'd like to say something and you've got an idea about how you might be able to say it and how you might be able to influence it, how you might be able to be influential, then go for it. You put that idea into practice, and you find that in the end there could be something about you that is really quite compelling. Cancer, I do think that things are looking quite good for you at the moment, but it's not a lazy day. It shouldn't be a lazy day. The moon is starting to move into your sign. Now, when the moon moves into your sign is rather dependent where you are. If you're in the Americas, it's this morning. If you're in Australasia, it's late this evening. But if we assume that the moon moves into your sign today, then that does really help things out. It makes you feel that things are okay, that you're in the right place, that you're not a crab out of water, or whatever, wherever crabs might feel out of place. No, you're not out of place. You are absolutely in the right place, and you can feel comfortable in your own shell. And when the moon moves into Cancer, it makes a square to Saturn, and it makes a square to Neptune. And you might then think that this moon square Saturn, moon square Neptune might be a problem. I don't see why it should be a problem, because you have to remember that Saturn is now in Aries, and Aries is an important sign for you. It's an angular sign, and the lesson or the message of Saturn in Aries is for you. It's time to get yourself together. It's time to take your direction seriously. And so moon square Saturn, okay, it might not be a fun aspect, but it is a dynamic aspect, and it is useful, and it is motivating. And you might have some kind of momentary realization, maybe quite negative, might even be a bit of a shock, but you have this realization, and as a result of this realization, you start to see, well, actually something has to be done. You've got to do it, and it's not necessarily going to be easy. It's going to be hard work, but today with Moon square Neptune, Moon is square Neptune, and Moon square Saturn, you're able to put in the work. And then there's this question of, what is that Moon square Neptune? What's that all about? And so we do have a Saturn-Neptune conjunction. And so it could be that you have an idea about what you would like. The idea may at first sight seem far-fetched, but if you're able to really push yourself and struggle a bit, then you can take something that maybe seems far-fetched and you can make it real. You can manifest it, and that would be that would be great. And I think Cancer, that is something that very much you can do, but you might have to do it in your own way. If you try to do it in company, then things might not be quite so easy. Moon square Saturn is an aspect that, while it might be dynamic and motivating, it may not be helpful if you're trying to get on with people, especially if you're trying to get on with people in a rather unfocused way. If you're trying to, let's say today, enjoy yourself in another person's company, then Moon square Saturn, no, I think it could be a problem. There just could be just a mismatch, different priorities. Now, if you've both got some overarching purpose and you're quite gritty and ruthless about it, got to get this thing done, then that Moon square Saturn is probably going to be fine. But if you're trying to be light about it and you're trying to just have fun, enjoy yourself, nothing's particularly important, then that Moon square Saturn could be a problem. And then the Moon square Neptune could cut in, and everything could get confused and everything could get sort of messed up. So that does mean, Cancer, that possibly you should be trying to do things in your own way, and trying to do things another person's way, or spending a lot of time trying to compromise or give in to other people's demands, all that kind of stuff. It's not going to work. So the more focused on yourself you are, the better. Leo, well, the sun is moving into your sign, so the Leo season is starting. And I must emphasize that the sun really does work well in Leo. The sun rules Leo. And so, if you take a point system, for example, William Lilly in Christian Astrology, he has a point system for evaluating the planets, and he gives a planet +4 for being exalted, and +5 for being its own sign. So he would give the sun +5 for being in its own sign, and so that that's really good. And the sun is also moving into its triplicity. I mean, using William Lilly's framework. So the fiery triplicity, according to William Lilly, is ruled by the sun by day. By night, it's ruled by Jupiter. So you could argue that you should be doing the important stuff by day. Now, that shouldn't be much of a problem. I mean, the working day, that's a time to be doing things. And so, certainly if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, when, the days are long, that's not a problem. If you're in the Southern Hemisphere, then, do try to concentrate your activities on the hours of daylight. Avoid important meetings by night. It's not because important meetings are going to not work out by night. It's just because they'd be really much better if they happened by daylight. So, overall, Leo, you can see that things are looking pretty good for you with this sun changing sign. And the sun, when it moves into Leo, it is making a trine to Saturn and a trine to Neptune. And so over the next few days, you'll feel these aspects. And so it may be, Leo, that you have a chance to really stabilize things. So it's not just that you're going to be feeling good about yourself and your prospects and also feeling optimistic. It's not just that. It's that you can take everything that you're excited about and make it real. And so that means it can last. It's not just something that's just going to continue for a few weeks and then just fizzle out. So that might be something that you want to bear in mind. And just because the sun is moving through Leo, doesn't mean that you have to be a super extrovert. Must make it clear that not every Leo is an extrovert. You can be a Leo introvert, not a problem, absolutely can happen. And I have known introverted Leos. And, the sun, it is moving into Leo, but also the moon is moving into Cancer. And so that's kind of interesting that the sun and the moon are moving into different signs really within about an hour of each other. The sun and the moon change signs. And so you're going to feel confident, you're going to feel a new confidence today, but you're not necessarily going to at the same time feel that it really is a time to be talking to lots of people, to announcing your intentions. In fact, your introverted streak, and all of us have an introverted streak, Leo's included, that introverted streak could actually start to make itself felt today, as the moon moves into Cancer. So, don't feel that there are things you absolutely need to shout about. They can probably be left until later. And besides, there are things to work through. And you just know when you know that there is a process of change going on. And it's quite a rapid process of change. It's not about you. It's about where you are operating, where you're living. It's about your community, maybe your nation. There is rapid change unfolding, and you're aware of it probably more than most people are. And part of what you might want to do is to think about this change. Think about what are you going to do about it. And then, Leo, your best choice might be to just sit it out, or sit out the period of contemplation, just contemplating it, trying to work it all out, and not feeling that you have to take immediate action. And do bear in mind that as far as the lunar cycle is concerned, this is the waning part of the cycle. It's the real end of the lunar cycle. We do have a new moon coming up in sort of 2 days' time. I think it's that would be Thursday the 24th. We've got a new moon at 2 degrees Leo, and that's going to be great. It's always good to have a new moon in your own sign, but it's that time just before the new moon when things are just coming to an end, and you don't want to sort of initiate anything new, even though you perhaps want to. It's just not the right time. And so perhaps over the next couple of days you can just sort of sit it out and work out what your next move might be, but not make assumptions, because when a new moon actually hits home, you might start to realize that things have changed, and what you thought was the most obvious thing in the world to do, you might then realize, actually, no, there's actually something else that you want to apply your energies to. And I should, I think, say something about relationships. And the Sun is making a trine to Saturn. I mentioned that. And this Sun trine Saturn could be very helpful. I've already described Sun trine Saturn as a stabilizing influence, but it could be about another person. Saturn rules Aquarius, your opposite sign, and so the Sun trine Saturn may represent the way in which another person can maybe stabilize you and can provide some kind of structure. And don't think that you've got all the answers, and don't think that your approach is necessarily 100% right. And it might be a case where you can rely on another person who could be more sensible than you and who does have your best interests at heart, and such a person might be worth trusting. Virgo, there is a conjunction between the Moon and Jupiter in Cancer. I mean, the conjunction is not exact today, but it's forming, and you can feel it, and you may just be aware that something is coming together. Could relate to other people. It's not necessarily coming together easily, because the Moon, before it makes a conjunction to Jupiter, does have to make a square to Saturn and Neptune. So there could today be moments where you have to realign, where you become aware of things that could go wrong, that are sort of holding you up. And this might especially be the case if, from a social viewpoint, I mean, part of you is very sociable at the moment, but you have your reservations, and you'd love to trust everyone, but you don't feel that you can. And you could say that if you feel that you can't trust someone, then you should go with that feelings, or at least explore it. You find out what it's all about, and it could be that you have to do something to put your mind at rest. Find out what it's all about, or you might have to make a decision about another person and say, well, maybe this person is not trustworthy, but there are other people who can be trusted. So you might have to do some juggling there to work out the best way of handling things. But in the end, the Moon gets past that square to Saturn and a square to Neptune, and it starts to make a conjunction to Jupiter. And that Moon conjunct Jupiter, which is going to be exact tomorrow, is pretty favourable, and it may allow you to benefit from another person, and also from a social viewpoint, you can find your voice and you can find your place. Yeah, I said it may not be entirely easy, but in the end it will come together. And one thing that will sort of help see you through is your fundamental belief that in the end things are going to be okay. Yeah, you often have your doubts, and you're not sure, and perhaps you overanalyze the situation, but something is telling you that it is going to work out, and that perhaps should be something that you're open about. Don't be afraid of being positive about something. Very often it's difficult to be positive because you might be afraid of being embarrassed. It's kind of easier to be negative rather than positive, because there's always the danger that if you're too if you're too positive, well, you might be accused of being naive. And still, there is a place for positivity, and I think there is a place at the moment for Virgos to be positive and to just see, see how things really could work out. Now, one aspect what we do have at the moment is Mars making this conjunction to the South Node, and the Mars South Node conjunction. Okay, it's not exact. It's separating. It's reached its peak a day or two ago, but it's still operational. And Mars is also making a square to Venus. So we got Venus square the South Node, and so we've got Mars still wanting to do things, and your view that you should be positive and you should be dynamic is fine, but there's just some danger that you take things too far, that you feel that you just have to assert yourself, and you could just go over the top in your assertion, and that could be very grating. That's not what people are going to appreciate with that Venus square Mars. And as I've already indicated, Venus square Mars is an attractive aspect, but it can be troublesome. And if you are too definite, you make it too clear who you are, then you're kind of forcing people to make a judgment. You're almost saying, this is who I am. What do you think? Some people might think you're wonderful, but other people might think, no, you're not wonderful at all. And they might make up their mind, and it might be difficult to change their mind. So don't be too definite. You can be yourself, you can be positive for sure, but don't take it too far. Because what you don't want to do is you don't want to force anyone to make a decision, because that decision may not always work in your favor. Libra, we have some sign changes today. The sun and the moon both change sign. Okay, if you're in Australasia or New Zealand, those sign changes might be more relevant. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, those sign changes might be more relevant until sort of very late this evening or into tomorrow. But in the end, those sign changes do matter. Whatever your time zone. So those two sign changes are the moon moving into Cancer and the sun moving into Leo. And moon moving into Cancer from a Libran perspective is quite a fortunate event. Even though it does happen every month, it's not an unusual event. But moon moving into Cancer does give you new confidence and gives you a better idea about who you are and what you want. It also gives other people a better idea, and I think you can be more definite. You can afford to be more definite, and in most cases, people are going to trust you. You'll come over as being someone who knows what they're doing, and additionally, there'll be just something about you in general that is quite sort of reassuring. Now, while the moon going into Cancer is something that really is good, you do have to be aware of the fact that the moon, when it moves into Cancer, does make a square to Saturn and does make a square to Neptune. And so this might be about you really wanting to make an impact, but something's holding you back. It might be that you're being held back by people. Some people are just not being supportive, and that might be quite frustrating. Or you might be taking some people more seriously. you might be imagining how you are being judged. And there could be a certain self-consciousness with that moon square Saturn, moon square Neptune. Taking the social side of things too seriously. So if you think you're being judged, if you think you're under the microscope, that could restrict your sphere of activity, and you might feel that you just can't do everything you want to do. And so, Libra, be honest with yourself. Are we dealing with a psychological process, or are we dealing with something that's real? And just because someone is trying to hold you back doesn't mean they can succeed. And you also have to consider that this just might be a temporary setback. You have a hesitation as you sort of get your toes into the water. You're thinking, no, this is just not the right thing. It's cold and bad things could happen. But then the moon, having made that sextile square to Saturn, square to Neptune, does make a conjunction to Jupiter. So we have a conjunction between the moon and Jupiter in Cancer, moon in its own sign, Jupiter exalted in a high profile sector of your chart. So today and tomorrow, Libra, if you can really get yourself together, and you can do something which is of lasting value. And once things start going right, they will continue to go right. And additionally, Libra, you might have an opportunity to maybe confront a couple of your fears, to see what a fear is all about, and what were you really afraid of. And you might not want to check, you might not want to look at the details or the small print, and you might want to not want to think it through. But when you actually do think it through, and you do read the small print, and you start to, when you actually look at that fear face to face, then you may actually see that this worry just starts to dissolve. And being honest and sort of upfront is probably going to work. And so you might find that something that's been really bothering you just disappears, and you might be left with a great sense of relief that what you thought was a big obstacle, a big problem, is just nothing, and your path is clear, and you're now largely free to do what you want, and free as an individual. You're unencumbered, and I think you should be unencumbered. I think if we're looking at relationships, for example, it's not a day for being reliant on any one person. And people can be a problem, but don't exaggerate the problem. If you look the other way, stay out of their way, then it should be fine. But if you insist on spending a lot of time with one particular person, there could be problems. That might happen, but it shouldn't happen. And so, what I'm really trying to say is that ideally, relationships shouldn't be your main priority. I don't think you need anyone's help. And I think on an emotional level, there's no reason why you can't be quite self-sufficient. Scorpio, the sun is moving into Leo, and that is the big event of the day. And sun moving into Leo has an impact on all of us. The sun, now becomes very strong in Leo because the sun rules Leo, and it also rules the fire signs by day. So the sun is especially strong when it's above the horizon. And so what this means for Scorpio is, it is a time of year, because obviously the sun always sort of moves into Leo pretty much on the same day, give or take, same day every year. Okay, may not be the 22nd. Some years it might be the 23rd, but it's all around this time. And so it is a time of year when Scorpios can be very successful, and when they can really get things together, and they can sort of unfold their ambitions, and be honest and sort of upfront about it, and they can even afford to be somewhat arrogant. Now, you don't want to be completely arrogant. No one wants arrogance, but a bit of arrogance isn't such a bad thing, just provided it isn't taken too far. And so, with the sun moving through, starting to move through Leo, over the next few weeks, the next month, then really try to push things through to a successful conclusion. And the sun, when it moves into Leo, it does make a trine to Saturn. That's coming up over the next day or two. Sun in Leo, trine Saturn in Aries. That is an aspect that may not be incredibly exciting. It's quite a stabilizing influence, but it may just allow you to get something together, something you want to work on, and you can see the possibilities. Maybe you'll know that it might take a bit of time to just really make things happen. Maybe you'll just have to wait for Mercury to finish going retrograde, sort of in a few weeks' time. But it doesn't mean to say you should put down tools just because Mercury is retrograde. In fact, if you just keep working, keep revising with the sun making this trine to Saturn, and then you should find that things do really start to work for you. Okay, to begin with, it's a period of consolidation, but in the end, you will start to see very, very real results. Now, Scorpio, it's important that you're not just ambitious, but that you're also open-minded. Because it's not just that the sun moves into Leo, the moon moves into Cancer. And moon moving into Cancer, that works for you. The moon, of course, is in its own sign in Cancer, but it's also a water sign, and Scorpio, you're a water sign. So with the moon moving into Cancer, you're able to see things in a different way. And you might have been a bit too set in your ways recently. Maybe you were just taking things too seriously. And then the moon moves into Cancer, and you can see possibilities. At first, you don't want to bother with these possibilities. They seem too complicated. They seem too much like hard work. They seem too challenging. But in the end, moon moves towards a conjunction of Jupiter, and you start to realize that there are different ways of doing things, and if you adopt these ways, then it's just going to become much easier, and you're going to become much more effective. And that feeds into the fact that the sun has moved into Leo, and so with the sun moving into Leo, making that trine to Saturn over the next couple of days, that does bode well for any activities you're doing of a sort of a public nature. Okay, it might be your work, it might be your business, it might be something else. Something you're trying to project yourself. You can do all of this very well at the moment. Now, we do have a square between Venus and Mars, and I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself, but the problem is Venus square Mars is just continuing one day into another. And so, with this square between Venus and Mars, you perhaps are aware that you're not getting on with everyone. I mean, Mars is you. Venus can represent the other person. Venus is, after all, ruler of Taurus, your opposite sign. And so Venus square Mars, it's at the very least an awareness that you and other people do things differently. And however close you are to someone, you're not the same person. And you and the other person have different priorities. And you like different things. And there may be there may be real incompatibilities, there may be passing incompatibilities, but while those incompatibilities are really at the fore, then they can be dramatic. So with this Venus square Mars, yeah, it's true that you can be attractive, certainly at a distance, but when anyone gets too close to you and sees the real you, then there may be things about you that not everyone can handle, and it's just a passing thing. It's not a permanent state of affairs, but that's something you just have to bear in mind. And so Scorpio, at the moment, just a bit of emotional distance might not be such a bad thing. Sagittarius, Sun moving into Leo, and the Sun moving into Leo is good for Sagittarians. I mean, after all, the Sun is moving into a fire sign, and you haven't had the Sun being in a fire sign and since late April, when the Sun left Aries. And so with the Sun in Leo, you are starting to be aware, hopefully, of new possibilities, and you don't have to be of a view that everything has to be done in a particular way, and it's important to be broad-minded and to really go with things. So you see something new, and when you see something new, you have to explore it. It's not something that you can just treat lightly. You take the view that something important is in front of you. It's novel, and it can be of value. And so when you see something that is unfamiliar, just be ready to sort of work with it and see how well you can cope. And just because it's challenging and because it might even conflict with some of your existing views, just because of that doesn't mean that you shouldn't give it a go. And don't allow your own pre-existing moral code or your philosophy or your ideas about the world, don't allow them to hold you back. You need to be ready to see things in a different way, because it's just going to make things it's going to make things easier and more fulfilling. I mean, and that's really what matters. And you have to perhaps take things which could be rather alien and uncomfortable and make them part of yourself, really own them. And that's not always going to be easy, but I think that it's certainly possible. And if you want to be a free thinking and creative person, there have to be moments where you have to just incorporate new ideas, new information, because in such a way you are keeping yourself relevant. And at the moment that really does matter. And always consider alternative views and don't overreact. There is a square between Venus and Mars today, and there is some danger with this square, but that you are set in your ways. You really think that you've got it all sorted out, and someone challenges you, or you think they're challenging you, and you might respond badly to it. You think you've got it all sorted out, and how dare someone suggest otherwise. But you have to be open to criticism, and you do have to be open to alternative views. Capricorn, we have the moon moving into Cancer. This movement is important for you because Cancer is obviously your opposite sign, and so with the moon moving into Cancer, it does indicate that you need to give people a chance. You don't always give them a chance, and you might give the impression of being sort of easygoing and prepared to listen, but there are times when you can be quite sure of yourself, and it can be difficult to let another person have a different view. And so do see what other people have got to offer, and don't necessarily jump to conclusions. And by watching people without commenting, you give yourself a new understanding, and you can understand someone maybe sort of like never before, and don't allow yourself to feel threatened. When you see someone being open and honest, it can feel threatening, even though there's no logical reason for it to be threatening. Facts can be painful, interpretations can be painful, but there's no need for you to be pained, and you're perhaps confronting some of the things that you regard as being immutable, things which you don't want to compromise, you don't want to change, and yet when you even just have the suspicion that you're being challenged, it's all about interpretation. Someone says something, and you might just interpret it in a particular way as a threat or an implied criticism, but it's not. And you shouldn't make assumptions about what people do and how they express themselves. But you could, and that does mean that with the moon making a square to Saturn, there may be times when relationships are not always easy. And this is what I've been saying for a lot of the 12 signs. I've been talking, for example, about a square aspect between Venus and Mars, or in this case, a square between Moon and Saturn. And I've been suggesting that maybe this just isn't great for close one-to-one relationships. So this is just the way it is. Even though the Venus-Mars square can be quite exciting and quite emotionally intense, it doesn't mean to say that you just want to get involved with it just without thinking, because getting too close to anyone emotionally may not be advisable, especially today. But don't overreact to anyone. And one aspect that's starting to develop is a conjunction between the Moon and Jupiter, and the Moon and Jupiter Moon-Jupiter conjunction emerges from a challenge, and you think that it's just not working, perhaps between you and another person, but some new dynamic is coming into play, represented by this Moon-Jupiter conjunction. This Moon-Jupiter conjunction is exact tomorrow, and this Moon-Jupiter conjunction is obviously in Cancer, because the Moon is just moving into Cancer. It's in your opposite sign. And so what this Moon-Jupiter conjunction might represent is the ability for you to benefit from another person's actions, and it might be a surprise, and you might have your doubts, but it could just be a plain act of generosity, and you don't want to look a gift horse in the mouth, do you? Aquarius, Sun's moving into your opposite sign, and of course it will eventually, or not even eventually, it's already starting. When it moves into Aquarius, when the Sun moves into Leo, it's starting to make an opposition to Pluto. So what's going on, Aquarius, is that you've got this Sun opposition Pluto across the main axis of your chart, Pluto in Aquarius, Sun in Leo, and so that may say something about what is unfolding in terms of relationships. I don't know whether you're involved in relationships, but if you have any important relationships, then the Sun moving into a conjunction of Leo does matter, and there may be something about the power dynamic there, because the Sun in Leo is very strong, and so that could indicate that another person is very strong, maybe someone you've underestimated, and you thought that the power balance was under control, but suddenly with Sun in Leo, particularly opposition Pluto, you may see it changing, and you perhaps don't have quite as much power and control as you used to have. Now, is that a problem? I don't think it is necessarily a problem, but I think it's important that you are aware of it, because you don't want to get involved in a power struggle. You could get involved in a power struggle, and I'm not saying it's unnecessary. Maybe it just happens. There is this question of who does have the power, and all things being equal, probably other people hold most of the cards. And it's not just about close relationships, romance. It could be about any form of interaction with another person, any form of interpersonal dynamic. There just seems to be the possibility that you just don't have the control that you would like to have, and the situation is probably going to be particularly intense over the next few days while the Sun is opposition Pluto. I think once the Sun-Pluto opposition has gone, it won't be so bad, but still the Sun is moving through Leo, and so just could be a time when you have to accept that some people do have the power, and just because another person is more powerful than you doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad thing. Sometimes you need to be told what to do. It kind of depends on the situation, doesn't it? So for your part, just make sure that you're in control as far as you can be, and that you've got answers for everything, and that you've done your research. Now, why is that important? Well, for example, if you are told something and you don't know the answer, you're not prepared, then you might not be in a position to respond. And if you can't respond, then another person might just have the power by default because you haven't got any alternative ideas. So make sure that you have your own structure, your own way of seeing the world, which you can use to ground yourself. Because if you don't have any ideas, you don't have anything that you're thinking about, you can't support yourself, then in the end it just might mean that someone gets their way, because nature abhors maybe just nature abhors a vacuum. If there's a vacuum of intention, a vacuum of purpose, you don't have a purpose, you don't have an intention, then someone else could fill the vacuum, and you could find yourself moving in a direction that you hadn't planned on. So do inform yourself, and do have a plan. I think that's going to be a very good way of making sure that you stay in control of your own life. Pisces, over the last couple of days, you might have felt that you needed a break. You needed perhaps to stop what you're doing, not feel that you have to be, here, there, and everywhere. And that's all well and good, but you can't stay in one place forever, and it might now be time to move on and to consider what is possible, and to show the world what you can do. So I think in many cases you're going to slowly start to feel more confident and start to be aware of real possibilities. And additionally, you might be less self-conscious, not sort of constantly worrying about what people might think of you. What if you showed your real self? That would be terrible, wouldn't it? What bad things could happen? Well, actually, nothing bad is going to happen. In fact, it is a time to be an individual and to really demonstrate your self-worth, and also to make the most of your creativity. There may be some passing concerns. You might, for example, be concerned about money. There is a square between the Moon and Saturn today, and that Moon square Saturn might be sort of a crisis of action. You feel that you'd like to do something, but you're worried that if you were to do it, it might have a cost, or perhaps you can't do something because you first need to do something else, and that something else is going to cost you money. So you might have all these sort of reasons why you can't do it, and it's not really about money. It's just about your own hesitation, and it could be something that's working on a largely psychological level. But the Moon, having made a square to Saturn, it moves on and it starts making a conjunction to Jupiter. And so this Moon-Jupiter conjunction I would have regarded as being very fortunate, very creative, and it's not just about today. In fact, the Moon-Jupiter conjunction is exact tomorrow. So, as the day progresses, you can start to really sort of tune into it, and you should find, increasingly that things should work for you, and it's important that you do things your way. I mean, you still have some hesitancy, and you want to take your time, and it's okay to take your time. Don't allow yourself to be hurried. There might be moments today when there is some pressure from other people, when people tell you to do something, or they tell you to hurry up, or they expect you to explain yourself. But do resist the pressure. It is unnecessary, and putting another person first at the expense of yourself is absolutely not something you should be doing, and that would be in conflict with your fundamental purpose. And you don't have to be rude about it, you don't have to be dismissive, you just have to be firm and clear about what you're prepared to accept, and what is just plain unreasonable. Now, one thing going on today is the Sun moving into Leo. So we have got the Moon moving into Cancer, and we've got the Sun moving out of Cancer and into Leo. Now, Sun moving into Leo, it's not something that has a definite impact on your sign. I mean, Leo is not an angular sign in the Pisces chart, but Sun does function at a very high level in Leo, or at least it works well in Leo. And so with the Sun moving into Leo, and it's making a square to a trine to Saturn, it may be a time over the next few weeks when you can sort of sort yourself out in a new way. And yes, you had some concerns, or you might have had some concerns about money, and perhaps you hadn't got enough money to do everything you wanted. But with the Sun moving into Leo, making a trine to Saturn, that does indicate that many Pisceans can get themselves together in quite a material way. And it might just be about noticing the right things. There are lots of things to notice, and if you try to engage with everything, then you're never going to get anywhere. And so you have to decide what is important. And I think this Sun trine Saturn may actually help you make the right decisions and make the right priorities. And that's certainly something you're going to be feeling over the next few days. And with the Sun moving through Leo between now and the end of August, towards the end of August, then it's a time of year when Pisceans can really get themselves together. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And I now want to switch to the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Tuesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 23, which is splitting apart. Now, on the surface, that doesn't sound great, does it? I mean, splitting apart is, it's about everything falling apart. The forces of disintegration and evil are rising. You're looking at an unstable structure. Look at this hexagram. The legs of a table have been sort of chewed through, and it's all about to collapse. It's not stable, and so that might be how it feels. That whatever you're involved in, it just doesn't seem to be working, and you look around you and things are not looking good, and it might feel that you've tried your hardest at something and it's just not working, and there may be other things, other forces that are trying to sort of worm their way into your life, and it's just feels that they're unstoppable. And it may relate to you and, wherever you're living, whatever country you're living in. Everyone, wherever they are, people seem to think that their country is in a state of collapse, whether it's, the US, and everyone, America, there's a lot of pessimism here. There's a lot of pessimism in European countries. Nowhere is great. And so with this hexagram splitting apart, it doesn't help, does it? The disintegrating forces are just all around. But the fifth line moves, and in the I Ching, the fifth line is not bad. It's usually quite a good line. And so what the fifth line is saying is that almost the forces of evil have a change of heart. And you might think that perhaps a person or a situation is entirely negative, and it can change. And so you perhaps have to be open to the possibility of that change. And one of the symbolisms that the I Ching shows is it's like a shoal of fish, and the fish just follow, and they follow to the right place. Who's doing the following? Maybe it's you. And if you provide a lead, provide an example, show how things should be done, perhaps you're being a role model, then certainly if there are people who are the problem, maybe they can have a change of heart. Or just maybe whatever forces you're dealing with, which appeared to be so destructive, all of a sudden do lose their power, and in fact can become a force for good. So there is a transition and a sort of quite a fortunate transition from something which is perhaps destabilizing to something which is really the opposite, can bring structure and good sense to the situation. Now, with this moving line, we do have a transition, and so this hexagram splitting apart, so the fifth line moves. So when that fifth line changes from broken to unbroken, the structure immediately becomes more stable. We move to hexagram number 20, which is contemplation. So we don't just have a stable structure, but we have a new situation. We don't have to act on this new situation. In fact, it's probably best not to do anything. We have to think it through. We can ask ourselves, well, what was that all about? What just happened? And there were moments where it was all rather touch and go, but we got through it all and we got to the other side. Now what? And why? Why did that disintegration happen? And we might have got over it, but we should be thinking about what went wrong and what this says about ourselves, what it says about ourselves, and what it says about the world in which we're living. So there is some thought that is required there. Contemplation. It's certainly not about action. And I want to finish by looking at the astrology for today, and in particular the fact that the sun moves into Leo, and that is indeed what happens. And so at what time is it? 14:29 p.m. London time today, Tuesday. Sun moves into Leo, and so what is the sun in Leo all about? Now, the sun is in its own sign in Leo. It rules Leo, and you can see the Northern Hemisphere bias here, because this is high summer, and so you can see logically that that's where you'd expect the sun to be. That is where the sun is at its hottest. It's not actually at its hottest during the solstice. It's hottest, end of July, beginning of August, I believe. If you look at the sort of weather and maximum temperatures, it's always around now that it does get hot, and so that's the sun in Leo. Again, Northern Hemisphere bias, and of course you've got the opposite. When the sun is in Aquarius. When it's fallen in Aquarius, tends to be the coldest time of year. The coldest time of year is not exactly the winter solstice. And of course, if you're in the southern hemisphere, that might not make much sense. And of course, you do have sometimes you have a suggestion that you should reverse the signs if you are born, say, in Australia or South Africa, that if you're born now, you should regard yourself as being an Aquarius because it's in the middle of winter. I would not go for that. I think that astrology has been something that has been sort of developing, and a tradition has formed, and so just because you're on the southern hemisphere doesn't mean that you should switch your signs and regard now as being as kind of like the sun being into Aquarius. I think the sun is in Leo regardless of whether you're in the northern or southern hemisphere. And so as far as what it means for the sun to be in Leo. Now, this might sound a controversial thing to be said. If we look at things from a sun sign perspective, you could say that people, logically, who have their sun in Leo are the luckiest of the 12 signs, because Leo is the best sun sign to have. And I know you've got people say, well, every sun sign is just as good as one another. But if you are traditional about it, you would say, well, Leo is in its own sun is in Leo. It's in its own sign, and if you have a point system, the sun gets 5 points for being in Leo, gets 4 points for being in Aries because it's exalted in Aries, and gets 3 points for being in a fire sign by day, because then it's in its own triplicity. Again, if you take William Lilly's system for allocating points according to essential dignity, and so you might expect people who have their sun in Leo to be strong, but it can be too much of a good thing. And one aspect of the Sun in Leo, but a common criticism of people with Sun in Leo is that they can be arrogant. Now, there are people who have Sun in Leo, indeed probably most people who have their Sun in Leo are not arrogant, but arrogance is a possibility. Believing that they are right, and then you can associate arrogance with vanity, and so that's a negative side of Leo. But we shouldn't forget that Leo is a fire sign, and it's if we take a Jungian approach, fire is linked with intuition, and intuition is different from feeling. Intuition is about making connections. Basically, we see the connections, and it's about knowledge. We just know things. You see, water signs and air signs can take a long time to make up their mind, but with Leo, it can become completely apparent and obvious, and so that is something quite positive about Leo. Though, I remember when I was learning astrology, that was one of the, part of learning astrology, I didn't even know anything about the signs. I wasn't really into signs until I learned astrology. One of the descriptions was Leo was lazy Leo. Something I remember reading, lazy Leo, and you can think of Leo like lions basking in the sun, particularly the sort of male lions, just basking in the sun, occasionally flicking their tails, being bothered by their lion cubs, but not really necessarily doing much, and just basking. And sort of perhaps basking is something that some Leos like to do, and so not feeling they actually have to do anything, and just basking in the sun, maybe basking in other people's admiration. So that is a way in which Leo can work. And Leo is a sign that can generate warmth. The sun generates warmth, and so the sun can be very generous. It produces radiation, and radiation in the fortunate sense of a word, and it can warm up its environment and just make other people feel good about themselves. Now, the sun is a male planet, and there is then the question of how the sun differs in a male chart and a female chart. And I will be looking at examples of people with the sun in Leo in a moment, but I think there could be a difference. And I think that my general view is that the sun, being a male planet, as men get older, as boys become men, I don't know, when they hit their teens, early 20s, they start to sort of very often leave their moon signs behind and become their sun signs. And so it's theirs. Whereas in a female chart, it's not always theirs. The sun, if a woman with sun in Leo, she might be attracted to a man who is very powerful. That's absolutely logical, isn't it? So if you into this idea of projection, a woman, as she gets older, as she reaches maturity, will start to own her moon and become her moon. But the sun is projectable, and that's not a bad thing. But it might say something about who she's attracted to and what kind of man she's attracted to, and I know this is a complete generalization, but you can see how a woman with sun in Leo might be attracted to a man who is powerful, who might be a Leo himself. So those are a few thoughts about sun in Leo. And so as far as this video is concerned, I was sort of the good, the bad, and the ugly. I thought, I know that's it might be a bit trite, but why not? It's a good way to classify people. Perhaps the good part, the advantages of having a sun in Leo, and the fact that there are plenty of really good people who have the sun in Leo, but there are a few people who are really awful who've got the sun in Leo, and we have to consider the different ways in which the sun in Leo can work. So let's just go through some people who have their sun in Leo. Oh, not just people, by the way. We don't want to restrict ourselves to humans, do we? So I'll start not with a human being. I will start with my dog. So my dog's got her birthday coming up. She is going to, her name is Chari, which is a Slovak for a charm. And she was born on August the 5th, 2022, in near Litovský Mikuláš in Slovakia. And so she absolutely has her sun in Leo, and she has her moon in Scorpio. So I don't know about female dog projecting. I don't know about that. But this is a dog who has her sun in fixed sign. She is absolutely obsessed with getting appreciation. You know, I mean, I think dogs do differ. I mean, I've had a previous dog of the same breed, from the same, pretty much the same breeder, from the same, pretty much the same place, and there wasn't quite this obsession with attention. And anyway, she likes, you know, she's very sociable, but she does like attention, and she doesn't like to be alone. And you know, it's a bit of a problem because she is so sociable, and you know that might be how Sun in Leo works in a dog. You know, I knew about this before we got the dog, and I thought, oh, is that so good, having a Sun in Leo and the Moon in Scorpio, very fixed. The dog won't be told. I mean, the breed won't be told either, but she is certainly more stubborn than our previous dog. And this is a reminder that Leo is a fixed sign. And so as far as people are concerned, well, I mean, let's start with a saint. Someone I've talked about several times, but Óscar Romero, the Archbishop of San Salvador, who was canonized after being martyred, after being gunned down while saying a mass. He's a sun in Leo, born August the 15th, 1917. So the question here is, how is the sun working, and what does that mean for someone who is a saint? I mean, I'm not saying I'm necessarily believing in saints and that they have special powers, but I'm not a Catholic, but I'm not going to say that the Catholic view of sainthood is wrong. I'm open-minded. Of course, if you have the concept of saint, I mean, saint is, you think about halos and sort of shining and creating energy and getting attention. And Óscar Romero, while he was alive, got attention. He was very clear about his opinions and standing out sort of for human rights and sort of against poverty, and standing up for the against the death squads. And he had the sun in Leo, and he has Sun opposition Uranus. So you could say that someone who has got a Sun exactly opposition Uranus in the 8th house, that's, the Sun is him, that's his personhood, and it's opposition Uranus in the 8th, and that may hint to the manner of his death, being sort of gunned down, maybe in a public sense. But I mean, this is just a reminder that Leos can be really good people, and they can be saints. And so I think he's the only person of all the Leos I've got that I can say for sure that he is a 100% good person. So if you're in the UK, you will have probably heard of George Galloway. So George Galloway, he has a sort of podcast, I think mother of all talk shows, and he was a member of Parliament, and he is famous for standing up against the Iraq War, and he is a vocal supporter of Palestine, and he is very spontaneous. I mean, in Britain, he is, there are two political figures, public figures, who are both incredible orators, and one of them is George Galloway, and the other is Nigel Farage. Now, I mean, Nigel Farage is an Aries, but Galloway is a Leo, and his sun in Leo is, it's in the 12th house, but that's Placidus. You might say, if you use whole sign houses, well, in fact, it's not really in the 12th house, is it? I mean, even with Placidus, I mean, it's just a couple of degrees from the ascendant. So really, he's got Sun, Pluto rising. So in fact, George Galloway, whether you use Placidus or whole sign houses, it's a double Leo, and so born sunrise with Leo rising. This is someone who is difficult to ignore, and he has a great need for attention, and he gets noticed, and it helps that he just has a natural ability to be an orator. And so you could say that George Galloway is a perfect Leo, perfect example of Leo working. And if you look at George Galloway's podcast, it's quite clear that George Galloway 100% believes that he is in the right. For example, about Palestine, or about other things going on, both at a sort of an international and national level. There's no sense of possibility of having different views. Maybe he has that view or another view. No, he's very sure about what he believes in, and I think that can be a Leo trait. Leos really can be very sure of that. And another Leo is J.K. Rowling. Now, with J.K. Rowling, we don't have a time of birth for her. It is said, I don't know whether it's true, but she has made it quite clear that she has withheld her time of birth, has not wanted to tell people what time she was born. I don't know whether that's true. And so she has her sun at sort of 8 degrees Leo, and this is someone who, I don't know to what extent she's projecting her sun, but she's clearly a powerful person who is able to make connections. I mean, that is perhaps part of being a writer. You have to have the story in your head, and Leo is about making connections. It's a fire sign. You can make all those connections, and it can all sort of come together. Though, with J.K. Rowling's chart, I do find it difficult because I don't have a time of birth, and we've got some planets where we really don't know where it is. I mean, you can see that her Mercury, for example, is right on the cusp of Virgo. We don't know whether it's a Virgo Mercury. We don't know whether it's a Leo Mercury. So it's quite difficult to interpret her chart. So I'm not too sure about that. But she is someone like Galloway who has definite opinions, and that may be a Leo feature. It is, for example, she has strong views about women's rights, at least in terms of how she feels that those rights are being infringed by this sort of trans obsession, and she thinks that women's spaces, for example, are important, and trans women should not be allowed to compete in female sports. So she's very clear about this and very definite about it. And so if you've got your sun in Leo, you might say that should logically be helpful if you want to be a politician, if you want to be the person in charge, a person in control. And so if you know about sort of El Salvador, the strong man in El Salvador who has reduced crime from, El Salvador used to be one of the most dangerous countries in the Americas, and now it's apparently the second safest after Canada. And he did this by throwing a lot of people in prison, by really cracking down on the gangs. And Nayib Bukele has his sun in Leo, and Leo, there can perhaps be a dictatorial streak to Leo, and I don't think he's a dictator, but he's a bit of a strong man. Of course, people on the progressive left are sort of critical of him. They talk about his human rights violations and so on. But then, on the other hand, are they living in El Salvador? He did what he felt he had to do to make things safe. And you could say, well, I mean, given how bad El Salvador was until very recently, then who are we to pass judgment? But he has the sun in Leo conjunct the North Node, so you might say that sun in Leo conjunct the North Node, using that sun and being into himself, having a certain self-belief, is perhaps was the right thing for him to do. And with the United States, well, the United States has recently had a couple of Leo presidents. It had Barack Obama. Barack Obama was a Leo, and so I don't really have to sort of look at his chart. I mean, Barack Obama, he's of course a controversial figure. As every president is. I wouldn't have said that Barack Obama was an obvious Leo. He didn't have that sort of obvious sort of Napoleonic arrogance and persona to him. Having said that, like every Leo, Barack Obama believes in himself. He believes he's he believes he's in the right, and so here's Barack Obama's chart. So he's got the sun quite close to the 7th house. Now that sun in the 7th house, okay, you could say, well, the sun is maybe in the 6th house. If you want to use Placidus, I would have said it has a strong 7th house feel, and so certainly from a whole sign perspective, it would be in the 7th, and I would regard it as being in the 7th. And if you're a politician, it can be useful to have your sun planets in the 7th, because you have to relate. It's not all about you. You have to there's a lot of compromising behind the scenes, and you have got to understand other people, make an effort to fit in with particular interest groups. That is the nature of politics. It's not just about Barack Obama. So you might say that sun in Leo is going to work well in the 7th if you want to be a politician. And so that's Barack Obama, and Barack Obama, not the only recent Leo president. We of course had Bill Clinton. I think Bill Clinton, sun at 26 Leo, quite close to Regulus. So Clinton, complete Leo. And you also see the fact that he had a Venus-Mars conjunction in his first house. So a man who was sort of charismatic, who he must have had a belief in himself to believe that he could get away with things. I mean, some of the stuff he was doing in the White House, and of course we had the Monica Lewinsky incident, which I'll be coming to in a moment. And so with Barack Obama, with Bill Clinton, I think from what I can see of him, he seems to sort of generate this charisma, whether you like it or not. He does generate a certain charisma. It seems people have noted this, and that is this concept of Leo being able to generate some energy that, like it or not, some people find attractive. And we can't forget about Monica Lewinsky. Now, Monica Lewinsky, she is a Leo. So here's Monica Lewinsky's horoscope, and so Monica Lewinsky has her sun at 0 degrees Leo, and so in fact tomorrow will be Monica Lewinsky's 52nd birthday, and so this might be seen as projection. So she has the sun in Leo, so it's a projectable planet. So when she's the White House intern, part of her is looking for a powerful man, sun in Leo. And who's more powerful than the President of the United States? And a future president who's a Leo is J.D. Vance. So J.D. Vance, sun in the 12th, Placidus, but sun in the first house if you use whole signs. And I think that, from what we can see of J.D. Vance, again, someone who believes in himself. Every politician does have to believe in himself, and is popular in some quarters, but is quite abrupt. See, J.D. Vance has his sun in Leo, trine Uranus, so sun trine Uranus, and he's got Mercury square Uranus, so it's a Uranus that is quite prominent there. And so he presents his views without apology. For example, lecturing the the Security Council, I forget what it's called, was it the European Security Council, the one that met in Munich earlier in the year? Was it earlier in the year when he sort of lectured European leaders on the fact that they were running roughshod over other people's freedoms? So J.D. Vance, he could be president. He's quite fixed. I mean, he's got Mars in Scorpio, Saturn in Scorpio, Sun in Leo, Venus in Leo. So he is a Leo, and he seems to show some of the traits of being a Leo. Now, if you're talking about women with Sun in Leo, there is a possibility of projection, and an example might be the former Canadian Deputy Prime Minister, Chrystia Freeland. So Chrystia Freeland, obsessed about Ukraine, one of the people leading the charge, Canada getting as involved as it can be in the West war against Ukraine, and she has 3 planets in Leo, and so very clear about what she wants, but where does it all come from? And with Chrystia Freeland, she is of Ukrainian ancestry, certainly on one side of her family, and her grandfather was a Ukrainian nationalist who was involved in the publication of an anti-Semitic sort of newspaper under the Nazis. The Nazis were tolerating it, so her grandfather was a pretty nasty piece of work in terms of his activity during the Second World War, and her grandfather, Michael Komiak, was a Leo. He was born on August the 12th, so he has his sun at 19 Leo. So although her sun is not exactly on Michael Komiak's sun, that sun is potentially projectable, and it's possible that, in terms of projection, it's not just on the father; it could be on the grandfather as well. So somehow that sun is kind of projected, perhaps, onto her own ancestry, and so it might be quite compulsive the way she's supporting Ukraine, like many people in Canada, because so many former Nazis and Ukrainian sort of Nazis and nationalists and so on went to Ukraine, and so that's impacted the body politic of that country. And so, when we talk about Leo, okay, we've talked about the good and maybe the bad, and there is then the ugly. People who have been, who perhaps are really awful. And if we're talking about the ugly, we might be thinking, for example, about Joran van der Sloot. So Joran van der Sloot was he first came to everyone's attention with it was an American schoolgirl, Natalie Holloway. I think she just graduated. It was 2005, I think, and she went on holiday to Aruba, which is a Dutch island in the Caribbean, and it seems that she was murdered by Joran van der Sloot, and maybe he she's perhaps spurned an advance of his. I mean, that's possible. Then he went to Peru, and then he killed again. He got involved with another woman in Peru, killed her, and so Joran van der Sloot has three planets in Leo, and he clearly had a high opinion of himself. He was not stupid. Apparently, he's a very good poker player, and there can be with Leo, by the way, speculation, gambling, maybe in certain cases. Don't forget that Jesse Livermore, the famous sort of speculator of the sort of early 20th century, who made fortunes and lost fortunes. He just kept gambling he would say speculating, and he would become hugely wealthy. He'd lose it all, then he would make it all again, and so that can be a Leo trait. But in terms of Joran van der Sloot, someone who has a high opinion of himself, and in this case, if he is spurned or doesn't get what he's looking for, then he becomes dangerous and can kill, and it looks as if he's killed twice. So Joran van der Sloot may be an example of the ugly, really Leo at its absolute worst. And with Leo and dictatorship, well, there's Napoleon. Napoleon was certainly a Leo, and people glamorize Napoleon, but one should not forget the sort of the human rights abuses and the deaths that were inflicted by him and his armies as they trundled around Europe. And you think of the Goya painting of these French troops executing peasants. I can't remember what the name of that painting was. So there is an unpleasant side to Napoleon, which seems to be underestimated now. Maybe it's because it was so long ago, but in terms of this century, the classic Leo dictator is Mussolini. So here is Benito Mussolini's horoscope, and so Benito Mussolini Benito Mussolini, you could argue, was more of a Gemini than a Leo. He had a load of planets in Gemini. He had Pluto, Saturn, Moon, Mars, and Chiron in Gemini, but he had the Sun and Mercury there as well. So clearly, the Gemini side, Benito Mussolini liked making speeches. I mean, the famous him on the balcony making speeches. That's a standard sort of image of Mussolini. And the Sun in Leo, he had airs and graces and had a high opinion of himself, and he wanted to restore Rome. Of course, Rome, in sort of ancient geography, Rome, the sign which was associated with Rome was Leo. Leo makes absolute sense. Leo is the place where the sun is in its own sign, and in terms of sort of Ptolemaic geography, 2,000 years ago, Italy and Rome were ruled by Leo, and Benito Mussolini wanted to sort of create this new Rome, and is not tolerating opposition. Sun in Leo, he believes he is right and he is a leader, and that's all there is to say about it. And finally, I mean, there's one chart that we can't really avoid. There is the nameless chart, and so if you look at her chart, she's a Leo. The woman who's married into British royalty, and she certainly has that Sun in Leo. And I've spent a long time thinking about her Sun in Leo, and what is it all about? Now, with her, you would think that there's a strong possibility that it should be projected. I mean, it's a female chart, so you might have expected the Sun in Leo to say something about the men she's involved with. But we don't always see the Sun in Leo being projected. If you think of successful Leo women, I don't know, sort of Madonna or J.K. Rowling, they're all both Leos, but as far as I can see, for what I know about them, the Sun is not really getting projected, and that seems to work for them. But in this case, the Sun in Leo is rather unaspected. I like to use quite tight orbs for aspects. I mean, yes, it is conjunct Mercury, but it's 6.5 degrees out, so I wouldn't have said that the Sun has really any close aspects. So the Sun in her chart seems to have a certain autonomy. It just has it's this energy that is not necessarily fully in control, and it might have been better if it had been projected. If she'd maybe found some billionaire, but she's kept it to herself. It's not been projected. And I would not have said that her husband really is represented by the Sun in Leo. I think her husband is represented by Mars in Cancer. I think the sort of moodiness and the military background of her husband is more reflective of that. Is more reflected by the Mars in Cancer, and so it just could be that I've said this before, so forgive me if I'm repeating myself, but I just feel that it is an issue with the Sun in Leo. The Sun in Leo can certainly believe in itself. It can have a narcissistic streak. I mean, in extreme situations, it can have a narcissistic streak, and can believe in it, believe it's right, and just will not be told. And one interesting thing about this chart is that it's got a lot of positive energy, a lot of planets in positive signs. You've got the Sun and Mercury in Leo. You've got the Moon, Saturn, Jupiter in Libra. So in terms of her personal planets, or her traditional planets, not Uranus, Neptune and Pluto, 5 out of the 7 are in positive signs. And one normally associates the positive signs to an extent with sort of originality, but one aspect of her is that she seems to lack originality in some of her creative efforts, but she still has a strong belief in herself. And remembering that Sun in Leo, that you think about her podcasts, and a criticism was made of her podcasts. She had these famous women that she was interviewing, yet she kept talking about herself, and that seems to be kind of strange, but it isn't really strange if you think about this chart and the compulsiveness of that chart, and the fact that Sun is out of control. She might come over as being someone who is controlled, Moon conjunct Saturn, but in her case the Sun is out of control. And I think that this is an example perhaps of the Sun in Leo really causing a lot of problems, and it's just dominating her, and it's for allowing her to make some terrible mistakes. And I'm not quite sure what she should do about it, but it's she doesn't seem to get it. And of course, the Sun in Leo is fixed. Sometimes it's very difficult to change. So, those are a few thoughts about this woman's Sun in Leo, and that's it. Those are my thoughts for the moment on Sun in Leo. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be very grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.